It's pretty clear in state legislation that they passed that law to keep council from doing things like what's being attempted here at the table tonight. And the city attorney is correct. In the last election, the population of Eureka Springs voted to approve the state ordinance which we function under, which assigned a 3% tax to lodging and restaurants.
Ms. Ballance?
I'd like to know how that issue got on the ballot. The last time that the people voted to have a 3% tax, how did that come forward? Was it a referendum from the people? It was a referendum from the people. So if we wanted to put this on the ballot, would you go on record to confirm that that referendum cannot come from this table? It must come from a petition of the people?
I would again ask you to explain what you mean by referendum.
If I understand correctly, and I may not, a referendum changes an ordinance or changes a tax structure, or a taxing. Perhaps I'm
a referendum cannot change state law unless it is a state referendum. And we are not talking about a city ordinance that you're changing. You're talking about changing state law if you want to dictate part of that money to go elsewhere.
Okay, I've given up on that. Okay. Now I'm talking about if we go to ballot, allowing the people to vote on what if they would like to reduce the tax to say 2% instead of 3% down to 2% or 2.5%. Would that could that be initiated at this table, or must it be a petition from the people to put it on the ballot?
As to the answer to that, I would need a little bit of research. I do not believe the off-the-cuff answer, because I think it can come from either entity. But I need to look at that before I give you. I'm not going to give you a yes or no answer tonight.
Would you do that and be prepared to let us know at the next meeting, or you could even email? Could you email us and let us know the answer to that, or does it need to be brought up at the next meeting?
If it's going to be something you potentially vote on, I would be hazardous that I would not like to email you. I would like to, for open meeting purposes, bring that back to you at a later meeting.
Okay. Do you think you could be prepared to bring that information to us at our next meeting?
At this time, probably, but I would not like to give you a definite answer until I've researched it preliminarily to get an idea.
All right, then I would move to postpone this issue until the next meeting.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
I thought I heard 3 in there.
Oh,
4-2.
I heard 4-2.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
New business, number 1, Appendix A revision. Motion to discuss.
So moved. Second.
Made and seconded. Floor is open.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe this has been postponed. Unless maybe my notes are in.
Yes.
It has been postponed?
Wait just a
To
second.
line up.
Maybe
I
we
think
missed.
Miss-
May I say something about that?
Yes, you may.
When I put the initial agenda out, I got a call from the planning chair who felt that you have all the materials, and I revised the agenda at that point before it was published. But I'm sorry, you must have the one. The most current agenda, the one that was published, just says recommended revision of Appendix A.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand why you believe that, but it got altered.
Okay, very well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I just want to make sure the planning can be here if they want.
floor is still open.
Do you have a copy of the ordinance? Pass this down there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Connor?
No,
Move that we assign a number and put this ordinance on its first reading.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to add a number of this for discussion purposes only, is that correct?
No.
First reading.
For first reading, okay. I understand. This would be a roll call. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
The number will be 2156.
Do you have-
Yes.
Yeah, I read it. I want to read it for you. Ordinance number 2156, an ordinance amending Appendix A of Chapter 14 of the Eureka Springs Municipal Code. Whereas the City Council of the City of Eureka Springs, Arkansas has made a comprehensive study and a review of the Planning Commission's recommendations, and whereas the Council believes that it is in the best interest of the city and its citizens, now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Eureka Springs, Arkansas, that Section 1, that Appendix A of Chapter 14 of the Eureka Springs Municipal Code is hereby amended as follows. A, all references to 75 Hillside Avenue and 35 Kings Highway are hereby removed, and that these addresses have been rezoned, comma. B, the number of units for 1 Kings Highway is hereby changed from 2 units to 3 units. C, the number of units for 263 Spring Street is hereby changed from 4 units to 5 units, and D, the number of units for 104 Wall Street is hereby changed from 3 units to 5 units. Section 2, repeal clause, all ordinances, resolutions, and parts thereof in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict. Yes.
Move to approve ordinance number 2156 on its first reading.
Second.
Yeah, that's a roll call.
Can be.
Yes. We'll just do a roll call vote. That's make it easier.
Mr. Berry.
Yes.
Mr. Raphael.
Yes.
Mr. DeVito.
Yes.
Mr. Pownall.
Yes.
Ms. Lindblad.
Yes.
Ms. Ballance.
Yes.
6-0.
Okay. All right. No further on that one. We'll move on to number 2, which has been postponed till July the 9th. Buildings, permits, parking lots, demolition, construction recommendations for planning. Also, number 3, removing word weekly from definition of dwelling units from planning, postponed till July the 9th. Brings us to number 4, ward map revision ordinance. Motion to discuss.
So moved.
Second.
Floor is open. Mr. Pennell.
Move assign a number to this ordinance and put it on its first reading.
Second.
Motion made to add a number on the first reading, for first reading.
Voice is good.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I have extras if anybody wants one.
Yes, please.
Oh, here's one more page. Okay, we good? The ordinance number will be 2157. An ordinance redistricting the Eureka Springs election wards. Whereas Eureka Springs has an obligation and a responsibility to ensure that its election wards are of substantially equal population and serve the public's best interest, and whereas population analysis of each ward utilizing 2010 census block data indicates the need for ward redistricting, and whereas Arkansas law vests the Eureka Springs City Council with appointment and redistricting authority, and whereas a redistricting plan has been prepared that equalizes ward population and ensures compliance with state statutes and equal protection requirements, and whereas it is the desire of the Eureka Springs City Council that a new redistricting plan be approved. Now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Section 1. That the ward redistricting plan as shown on the map which is attached hereto and made a part hereof bearing the following descriptions. Ward 1. Northern boundary. Includes all of the northern city limits boundaries in Section 8 and 9 west of the point where Pivot Rock Road intersects the northern city limits in Section 9, including Pivot Rock Road. Eastern boundary. Commencing at the point where Pivot Rock Road intersects the northern city limits boundary in Section 9, then southwesterly along Pivot Rock Road to Dairy Hollow Road. Thence along the western side of Dairy Hollow Road to the Clear Spring School area, excluding Grand Avenue and the Clear Spring School. Then southeast, excluding Dairy Hollow, to the southeast corner of Section 9. Thence east along Section Line 10 to Anderson Street. Then south along the eastern side of Anderson, including Anderson Street, to Step Street. Then southeast through the center of Step Street to Hively Street. Then south along the western side of Hively to Washington Street, excluding Hively Street. Then south to the intersection of Washington Street and Point Street, including Washington Street. Thence easterly through the center of Point Street to the point where Point Street becomes Rockhouse Street. Then southeasterly through the center of Rockhouse Street to South Main Street. Then southwesterly to the intersection of South Main and Armstrong Street, excluding all of the properties facing South Main. Thence northeast through the center of Armstrong to Lower Wall Street. Thence southeasterly through the center of Lower Wall Street to Wheeler. Thence northeasterly looping around and including all of Wheeler Street. Thence southerly to Upper Wall Street and Highway 62, Van Buren. Then southerly to Section Line 15. Southern boundary includes all of the southern city limits boundaries in Section 15 and 16. Western boundary includes all of the western city limits boundaries in Sections 16, 17, and 8. Ward 2. Northern boundary, commencing at the point where Pivot Rock Road intersects the northern city limits boundary in Section 9, excluding Pivot Rock Road, thence east to include all of the northern city limits boundaries in Section 9 and 10. Eastern boundary, commencing at the point where the northern city limits boundary in Section 10 intersects the eastern city limits boundary of Section Line 11, then south along the Section 10 line and along the Section 15 line, including the annexed property northeast of Mill Hollow Road, to the point where 117 Oak Ridge abuts the eastern city boundary. Thence along the southern property line of 117 Oak Ridge to the center of Oak Ridge, then southwesterly to the intersection of Harvey Road and Oak Ridge. Southern boundary, commencing at the intersection of Oak Ridge and Harvey Road, thence southwesterly through the center of Harvey Road to East Mountain Drive, thence northerly through the center of East Mountain Drive to the point where East Mountain Drive becomes Eccles, thence north through the center of Eccles to the intersection of Berryville Avenue, thence west through the center of Berryville Avenue to Steel Street, thence south through the center of Steel Street to the intersection of Flint Street and Steel Street, thence northwesterly through the center of Flint Street to the intersection of an unnamed street, thence westerly through the center of the unnamed street to North Main Street. thence south through the center of Douglas to the intersection of Armstrong Street, thence southwesterly through the center of Armstrong Street to the intersection of South Main Street. Western boundary, commencing at the point where Armstrong Street intersects South Main Street, thence northeasterly to the intersection of Rockhouse Street, including all the properties facing South Main. Thence northwesterly through the center of Rockhouse Street to the point where Rockhouse Street becomes Point Street. Thence westerly through the center of Point Street to Washington Street. Thence north to the intersection of Hively, excluding Washington Street. Thence north along the western side of Hively Street, including Hively, to Step Street. Thence northwest through the center of Step Street to Anderson Street. Thence north along the eastern side of Anderson Street, excluding Anderson Street, to section line 10. Thence west along section line 10 to the southwest corner of section 10. Thence northwesterly, including Dairy Hollow, the Clear Spring School area, and Grand Avenue, to the western side of Dairy Hollow Road to Pivot Rock Road, thence along the eastern side of Pivot Rock Road to the northern city limits in section 9. Ward 3, northern boundary, commencing at the intersection of Armstrong Street and Lower Wall Street, thence northeasterly through the center of Armstrong Street to the intersection of Douglas Street, thence north through the center of Douglas Street to the intersection of North Main Street, thence easterly through the center of the unnamed street to the intersection of Flint Street, thence southeasterly through the center of Flint Street to the intersection of Steel Street and Flint Street, thence north to the intersection of Berryville Avenue, thence east through the center of Berryville Avenue to the intersection of Eccles, thence south through the center of Eccles to the point where Eccles becomes East Mountain Drive, then southerly through the center of East Mountain Drive to Harvey Road, thence easterly through the center of Harvey Road to Oak Ridge, thence northeasterly through the center of Oak Ridge to the southern property line of 117 Oak Ridge, thence east to section line 15. Eastern boundary, commencing at the point where the southern property line of 117 Oak Ridge intersects the eastern city limits boundary of section line 15, then south along section line 15 to the northern city limits boundary in section 14. Includes all of the northern and eastern city limit boundaries in section 14, 13, and 24. Southern boundary includes all of the southern city limits boundaries in section 24 and 23, thence from the point where the city limits boundary along the western section line 23 intersects the city limits boundary in section 22, thence west and including all city limits boundaries in section 22, 27, and 28. Western boundary, commencing at the intersection of the city limits boundary corner in section 28, thence north and east along the city limits boundary in section 28, thence north along the eastern section 21 line, thence following the city limits boundaries in section 22, thence north to the southwest corner of section 15, then east 1/4 mile, thence northerly across Highway 62, Van Buren Street, thence northeasterly to the intersection of Upper Wall Street, thence northerly to Wheeler Street, excluding all properties facing Upper Wall Street, thence looping around Wheeler Street and excluding all of Wheeler Street, thence southwesterly to the intersection of Lower Wall, thence through the center of Lower Wall to the intersection of Armstrong. Phew. Be and is hereby adopted with said map to serve hereafter as the official ward map of the city of Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Section 2, that all previously adopted ward maps and boundary descriptions are hereby repealed. Section 3, that a duly certified copy of said map with the boundary descriptions attached shall be filed with the Carroll County Election Commission and filed in the office of the Carroll County Clerk.
I know.
My hats off to whoever was able to put that all together, but I do have a couple comments. One correction in the whereases. Insure should be changed to E instead of I. We're not writing an insurance policy.
Please be specific. I have read this 100
times.
times.
First paragraph. responsibility to ensure that its election wards, and then you go to the fourth whereas,
First, ensure on top.
Okay.
and the first sentence, last word.
Oh, ensures, okay.
Yeah, ensure is a verb.
Yes. As a point of clarification, do we have the census numbers of registered voters as it was realigned number-wise with this proposed ordinance for wards 1, 2, and 3?
Do you have the census number of registered voters?
Do we have the numbers that were changed with this realignment?
Of course, that's how we did it. But the census numbers are population. And the voters try to get it within a range because the two are not the same.
How did the numbers change from before and after? Just for clarification.
Do
Did
you
we see a
mean
significant-
literally how many people were moved from one ward to another? Is that the how you
Yeah.
mean? Or do you mean the mechanics of it?
No. How many actually were affected by it?
Approximately 148 people were moved from Ward 2, from Ward 3 to Ward 2. Not approximately, it was 148. And I can show you the background information downstairs if you'd like.
Anything from Ward 2 to Ward 1 or otherwise?
I didn't understand what you said.
Was there any other number changes?
No, it turned out to not be necessary. There were enough anomalies in the whole picture that they balanced each other out to a certain extent. And Ms. Ballance and Mr. Berry were in on the early days of checking what the census people provided versus reality on the ground here. And so there were interesting aspects from day one, but it came out to be within 2.9% variation between wards, given the numbers the census people provided.
Mr. Pownall.
Move we approve ordinance 2157 on its first reading.
Second.
Made and seconded. Is it a roll call?
Not for the first.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Further? All right. Moving on, number 5 was moved to unfinished business. This takes us to number 6, discussing yellow bags in next general election.
Move to discuss.
Second.
Floor is open. I know.
Going back a few meetings, and I almost got numb to this whole process, but then I started getting calls that of concern. But I'd like to go back to an earlier comment that any changes that were proposed to be made with the bag issue would be in violation of the CCWD contract. Therefore, I will ask the question, what is the status of the proposed changes that they are requesting of us that we were given prior to the last meeting?
I can't answer that question right now.
Because if you look at the contract, it states, I can find the yellow bag section. Apologize for having so much stuff, but Amendment to the agreement on page 5 is the title of the paragraph. It says no modification or amendment of this agreement shall be effective unless it is in writing, approved by the governing bodies of both parties, and signed by the authorized representatives of the city and the authority. The signed original is to be fastened to the original agreement, with signed copies retained by the parties. Consent to amendment or modification shall not be unreasonably withheld by either party. Written modification is not to become effective for a period of 14 business days, during which time either party may revoke the writing upon delivery to the other party of a written notice to that effect, dated and signed by a notary. This was brought to me by a citizen who felt that there's a feeling that it's nothing more than a misbalance issue, and it was brought to my attention real quick like that there's a lot of people that are concerned about this, and I was asked, and I didn't necessarily have the correct answer, but how do we get this on the next ballot? And from what I was told, that if there was a petition walked by the appropriate number, signed by the appropriate number of citizens compared to the number of voters in the last general election, that it could be submitted to the election commission and put on the ballot. Is that not correct? We're hearing that we as this table cannot put initiatives on the ballot, or request that they be put on the ballot. So the answer that I got was that an initiative, a petition, could be signed by the appropriate number of registered voters compared to the number of voters in the last general election, asking that it be put on the ballot to consider the yellow bag issue.
Since this is a contract between this body and Carroll County Waste, a contract is not usually available to the population to do what you're asking.
Well,
A statute change or an ordinance change can be proposed by the population and properly initiated or referred, depending on the issue. But this is a contract. The contract itself, you can't have the people voting once the city creates a contract.
Okay, so my question would be then, my question then would be, the advice that we've been given on one side of the issue has not been correct, because apparently we've been given a request to make changes. So therefore, I would think that we would be able to request changes. And we've been told we can't because it'd be in violation of the contract.
You can request changes to the contract. You cannot unilaterally make changes to the contract. I think there's a misnomer in what you're saying, in that you have the ability to ask for changes to the contract, but they have to be approved by both parties to the contract, or all parties to the contract.
I don't think we ever got that response before. I think we were just told at the table that we couldn't make changes to the contract or we'd be in violation of it.
That's correct. You cannot make changes yourself. You can request changes to be agreed upon by both parties or all parties to a contract. But you can only make that request. You cannot unilaterally make a change to the contract. And that's what it's talking about there. Both sides must approve, both sides as governing bodies must approve a change. They must be signed off on by the authority and of both sides, and then attached to the contract to become addendums or changes to the contract. You can request changes. You cannot unilaterally make or promulgate changes.
Yes,
I think it would have been nice if we'd have been told that up front. I think we're into game playing now, and I think it's beyond the point of further discussion until such time that a proposal be put together of what the Yellow Bag Committee feels is the consensus of the citizens. Now that we've clarified the black and white writings of the contract.
so what are you asking?
I'm just stating what I've learned and waiting for the Yellow Bag Committee to go forward or not take any more action.
Okay. Balance.
One thing I'd like to know, and I guess I'd like to know from the mayor since he's in charge of the law enforcement arm of our government, when it clearly says here that residents shall use approved bags, tags, or container, and commercial customers shall be required to use approved bags, tags, or containers, why is that stipulation being enforced on the residents and it is not being enforced on the commercial customers?
I'd have to find out for you.
Would you do that, please?
I can do that. I think you.
Because still, I drive up and down the streets on trash pickup night, and I see many businesses who have their trash out in front of their businesses in black bags. And that is not an approved bag or an approved tag or an approved container. But it's going on, and this contract is not being enforced. So I would really like to know why this contract is not being enforced equitably for everyone. Now,
I would caution council member not to make a determination of what is and is not an approval without some authority to back that up.
I'm pretty sure black bags, just regular old black bags that are sitting on the side of the street, are not approved bags, tags, or containers.
I would ask that you caution your comment that you're not sure of that until you have authority to say that that is correct.
All right. Then I would like...
I simply for your own protection.
Okay. Then we may be having customers who are not in compliance with our contract, and I would like the mayor to find out if indeed people are not in compliance, and if indeed they are, why this contract, the specification of this contract, are not being enforced equitably among all customers that fall under this contract. And with that, I would like to postpone this agenda item to our next agenda so that we may have more time to do a little more research and come back with a few more answers.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Can we have the other members of the BAG committee here?
I can
So we can ask
request
some
it. I can't force them to be here.
Okay. But we still don't know who they are.
They're whoever wants to be there. It's not been a committee that's been closed. It's been open to anyone who's wanted to show up. And I cannot compel them to be here at the next meeting, but I certainly will ask them.
Okay. Maybe I'm not understanding it. Any other committee, we try to comply as best we can to council's request to show up at certain times when requested.
No problem. I'll ask them.
Last
no
we
problem.
knew it was Bill and Bill. We didn't know a last name. Who? Do you know their
They're
last name?
concerned citizens. I certainly will ask them. And the others as well who have cared enough to share with us their opinions and their knowledge. I will ask them each, but I cannot compel them to be here.
Okay. Because we never knew when the meeting was. We didn't know where it was held, what time. We didn't know anything.
Every meeting we've had, you've been aware of. I've had a lot of phone calls, a lot of people checking in
I've
with
never
me.
been aware of any of the meetings where they were at.
Yes, you have. I've announced right at this table the meetings we've had. The official meetings have been very few, but there have been people taking it upon themselves to do research, to check back with me. It's been sort of an impromptu committee. And anybody has been welcome to share their opinions, to ask questions, to join us, to call me. I don't know what you're getting at here, Mr. Mayor. What are you getting at here, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I'm asking who the committee members are.
Pardon?
Who are the committee members?
Who are the committee members?
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone who's cared to join in.
So you don't have a set committee?
No.
Okay.
It's an impromptu ad hoc kind of thing.
That's the question.
Anyone who's cared to join in has been welcome to join in.
Okay.
I have not excluded anyone, and I cannot compel them to be here at the
I
meeting.
got that part. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Next is number 7, proposed EMS charges. Motion to discuss.
So moved. Second.
I'm Bob Pettis. I'm a paramedic at the Eureka Springs Fire Department and also assistant chief. EMS is one of my major job responsibilities. Just let me give you a brief summary. I believe you have both draft ordinance and also a proposal that explains the ordinance. But let me just summarize that for a second. In 2006, City Council set the ambulance service fees that we charge at this time. Medicare has increased their fees as well as restructured the way that they allow charges. Other insurance companies have much higher allowable rates than Medicare does, and especially Medicaid. The city can increase the EMS revenues by increasing our charges, in collecting more money from insurance companies, while just minimally affecting what a patient would pay out of pocket. In that you'll see with all of the tax-based service area residents, we would write off any fees not approved by their insurance company. And so there'll be minimal difference to what a patient pays, but we'll see a significant increase in the amount of revenue we collect during a year. I've also added one thing that wasn't mentioned in an old ordinance, and that is for indigent patients, that we, when the receiving hospital does a charitable write-off on their bill, that to the percent they write off their bill, will do the same if requested by the patient and verified by the hospital.
Ms. Lindblad.
Hi, I called you today, but it might have been too late. They said it was your day off. I don't understand what all these terms are here, so
Sure.
It doesn't really tell me anything to have this, because
Okay.
I don't understand any of the codes at all.
I'd love to try to explain that.
Okay.
The codes that I have listed, like AO 425, are all codes that are adopted by the Medicare fee schedule. 60% of our patients, approximately, are Medicare patients, and so that's kind of what we base our fee schedule around. AO 425 mileage, we charge right now $9.50 a mile, and I propose that we change that to $10 a mile. You see that Medicare will approve $7.10 of that. So on Medicare patients, we are required by federal law to write that off, anything above that $7.10. But then I'm also proposing that for other insurers like Blue Cross Blue Shield, we'll collect from that insurance company what they allow, and then from the patient only what the insurance company doesn't allow, but what they do allow but don't pay. In other words, a lot of insurances will pay 80% of what they allow as appropriate. And so if we charge $10 and the insurance company approves $8, then we'll collect $2 from the patient. And so these other charges, AO 426, all of the ALS 1, ALS 1 emergency, BLS emergency, ALS 2 and specialty care are all of those are base rates. We charge only one of those base rates per patient, and then the mileage.
Yeah, but that doesn't tell me what these what is ALS 1? What
Okay.
is ALS 2?
Sure.
I don't know what they are.
Okay. Generally in EMS, we differentiate the
Advanced life support.
advanced life support and
He can
basic
answer.
life support, so that for patients who require advanced life support, they get an advanced life support charge. If that is also an emergency, then they get the ALS 1 or advanced life support emergency charge. And then ALS 2 is a much more complicated advanced life support situation, such as a cardiac arrest call, where multiple resources and supplies and skills are used in an attempt to save that patient.
Okay.
And then specialty care is when we have to have an additional person in the ambulance on a transfer from one hospital to another when the patient's care requires something that exceeds normal paramedic care.
Okay. What does BLS stand for?
Basic life support.
Okay.
Things like splints and ice packs, but not things like intravenous fluids or medicines or defibrillation or pacing or tracheal intubation, the things that we do with advanced life support.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I do have a few questions.
Yes.
When these funds are collected, where do they end up?
Where do they end up? We have a billing company who sends the bill out, files for the insurance. That billing company then deposits the monies that they receive on a daily basis into an Arkansas bank, actually into one of the banks, I think, here in EUREKA, and then reports. We get those reports on a, Lonnie, correct me if I'm wrong, on a monthly basis, what they collect, and then we then turn around and pay that billing company a certain percentage of the money that they collect and deposit in our bank for their services.
Okay, so what I'm specifically asking is the net of these funds that are collected, does that go to our general fund?
That goes into the general fund.
Is it specifically earmarked for the fire department or the EMS department, or does it just go into the general fund?
It just goes into the general fund, but I think it's also taken into account when you make a budget for the fire EMS service, in that we are providing X amount of dollars, and that's reported and also budgeted for during a year.
Okay, so it goes in the general fund, and it generally speaking is allocated to your department, but it would not necessarily have to be allocated to your department?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, when we look at this ordinance, is it appropriate to ask a couple of questions about it right now?
I think so,
Proposed
yes.
ordinance? All right. When I see this sentence that begins, residents of our tax-based service area who are not insured shall be paid in full when the Medicare allowable are met. Besides the grammatical portion of that, residents of our tax-based service area who are not insured shall be paid in full when the Medicare allowable are met. Does that mean, okay,
That means that since we're writing off charges for Medicare patients and for other insurance companies, but our charges are typically higher than what they allow, we're not punishing the uninsured patient by charging them a higher rate. So we're charging at the lower Medicare rate for those patients.
so residents who are not insured shall be paid in full when the Medicare allowable.
When they've paid what the Medicare allowable is, we write the rest of it off.
Okay, who are not insured shall be paying for it. That makes sense now, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you're writing that off, then how does the city get reimbursed for those charges?
For the charges that we don't
If
collect,
that you're writing off, yeah.
we don't collect.
We should get the Medicare.
Because it's Medicare? Well, it says here
Well,
for the
no,
uninsured, you said what, you
what-
charge them what Medicare would charge, and then you write the rest of it off. So the city has provided the services, all
Yes.
right, and you're charging what Medicare would pay, and then you're writing off the rest. So isn't that a loss when you're writing off the rest of it?
Overall, once you take all of the changes into account, it'll be an increase in revenue for the city. If we take the uninsured patients, the most vulnerable population that we have medically, and we charge them more than the folks who can afford to buy insurance, then I feel that's a real burden on those families, and might also discourage our citizens from seeking emergency care when it's appropriate. And so that's why I have proposed that we limit their charges to the Medicare rate.
So the difference there then would be paid off by the increase in rates? Is that what you're saying? I mean, when you're saying that you're writing part of it off, then I wonder, well...
Of that patient's individual bill.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but the city's rendered the services, so this is the bill, they paid this much, you're writing that much off. So how does the city get reimbursed for that much? Is it
city is not
increase in...
the
That's
city
just
is-
a loss for the city?
Yes. Well, or a gain, because we could charge nothing. I mean, either way. The increase in the fees, we have specifically set above the insurance allowable rates so that we can meet each company's allowable rate, increasing our overall collections. But in doing so, we didn't want to penalize the uninsured population with charging them much more than
Right.
the insured population. So you can look at it as a loss for that individual patient, but overall it's going to be a gain because we'll be collecting more from insurance, from patients who have insurance that pays well.
Okay.
In light of the item on the agenda, proposed adjustments, it's okay. I'd like to ask if the city attorney has reviewed this and that we put this on make a motion that we put this on the agenda for the next meeting.
For a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Discussion, please.
More discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to reassure my colleague that, having been in the medical profession for over a quarter of a century now, and sometimes involved in billing, Medicare billing, and other insurance billings, what they're proposing here is real industry standard. And the way they've proposed it is actually somewhat charitable to the people among us, to our residents, and other people that most need that service. So this is actually business as usual in the medical profession. I don't see anything really out of line with this. The charges are pretty much what they are allowed to charge, what they may expect. And as far as writing off things, part of that is mandated by Medicare. They have their certain mandates that you can only charge Medicare patients so much. You can charge them more, but at what Medicare pays, that's it. If you cannot get more necessarily from the patient. I just want to reassure you that, generally speaking, I think this is probably well within the range it should be, and they are also being somewhat charitable to our residents who do need charity. So, of course, you're welcome to research it some more, but I think it's probably pretty good and in line.
Well, I would just wanted to be sure that the city isn't losing money, because I have had people contact me about our EMS services, especially as we've expanded them and now include out at Grassy Knob. And I've had people ask me,
That's been our service area since 1971 when we started EMS.
past Leatherwood, what we talked about the other day. Yeah, but I've had people asking me and saying, well, why are we going way out there, and is the city losing money doing that instead of this, are the citizens here paying for citizens out there? And it's been brought up. Even when I was on council before, it was something that was brought up pretty often.
Yes. When the city first started an ambulance service, they cover essentially the same area that we cover now. In the interim, they've created the Western District of Carroll County Ambulance Service, who we have contracted with, and they, just like the citizens of Eureka Springs help support our ambulance service, the citizens in the Western District of Carroll County also do the same.
Okay, I think that's what the fire chief told me the other day. Okay, all right.
Yes.
Mr. DeVito?
I would move to assign this ordinance a number and place it on its first reading.
Yeah, we've already got a motion on the table.
Oh, I didn't know there was a second on that motion. I apologize.
Could we get an answer to my question from the city attorney before we go any further?
Mr. Weaver?
Have you reviewed this?
Restate the question.
Yeah, restate your question.
Did you write/review this ordinance?
I don't believe I have.
I think he would.
I don't remember seeing it, but I won't swear. If they tell me I have.
And whether he has or not, I mean, procedure has been that they be reviewed, and my only concern would be having an identifier attached, and I understand that there are people who know a lot more about medical codes and care, and that this may be proper and good, but whenever I'm sitting here looking at something that we're putting into law, I sure think we ought to be defining AO 425 and AO 434 and ALS and BLS and BS and everything else.
I think I can provide the definitions for all of those in the interim, yes.
I would recommend that we go ahead and pass this on the first reading. We have sufficient time over the next subsequent readings to have the city attorney look at it. If there's any questions, they can be addressed. We can always amend this ordinance. I hesitate waiting another couple of weeks because it is a billing process. So I would encourage council to go ahead and pass this on its first reading.
And if we can, if this is appropriate, I would like to have this ordinance become effective on September the 1st.
I didn't hear that.
September 1st.
We still have a motion on the table to send it to Mr. Weaver for his perusal and postpone until the next meeting, and it was seconded. That's the one we have to deal with first. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
No.
Okay.
What's yours?
So you were aye, you
3
were aye.
ayes, 3 nays.
You were aye. Okay.
What was your final count?
3 and 3.
I think I would like Mr. Weaver to look at it also.
4-3.
So what happened?
It's being
Goes to Mr.
postponed
Weaver.
so Mr. Weaver can take a look at it. And I'm really glad because this, I don't understand what it's actually saying. So
I understand.
This will be the 9th of July
Well,
meeting, is
it's-
that correct?
Yes.
it's not an easy. Okay.
Okay. Mr. Weaver, it's in your ballpark. Okay.
I guess.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate the effort that's been put into it, and that the questions weren't directed at what effort you put into it. I just feel that we need to be consistent in our procedures, even though some of us aren't consistently consistent.
I'll be glad to come back and speak with you after it's been looked at and we can talk another night.
Okay,
Thank you,
you.
guys. All right. Number 8, voting for council members by ward. Motion to discuss. Mr. DeVito.
I would move to instruct the city attorney to draft an ordinance reflecting voting by wards for the
Okay, look.
city of Eureka Springs.
Okay. Look, we need to first vote to open for discussion and second, and then you can make the motion. Okay? Okay.
Not necessarily.
Karen, you did opening discussion, right?
I made the motion to
Second.
open
And
discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now, Mr. DeVito, one more time.
All right, I would move to instruct the city attorney to draft an ordinance allowing for the residents of Eureka Springs to vote by ward.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I would like to add to that we need to have it by the next meeting because we're under a little bit of a deadline to get this going. I don't know how I should put what.
Amend the motion.
I would like to amend the motion that we have this ordinance by the next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, first we have to vote on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion's been amended. Now back to the original motion. Should read it one more time with that amendment.
To instruct the attorney to draft an ordinance to allow the citizens of Eureka Springs to vote by ward.
Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Any further? Okay. Mr. Weaver, it's in your part. Number 9, executive section called by Ms. Ballance.
I move to go into executive session.
You need to state the general purpose so that it's stated on the record that it's legitimate, not the substance thereof.
I move to go into executive session to discuss the performance of a department head.
Then you take a vote to go into the session.
Performance of what?
Take a vote to go into the session.
We've been back in regular session from the executive council, or executive session, which had to deal with a department head issue. Discussion.
Make a motion, take no action based on the executive session.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Number 10, the extra executive session has been withdrawn. We are now in agenda setting. Motion to discuss.
I'd like discussion of the taxi franchise for the next meeting.
Move to discuss. Move to discuss agenda setting.
Second.
Got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All in favor.
Aye.
Go ahead. Next. Yes.
Motion to discuss taxi franchises.
Got it.
Oh, I didn't get a second.
Okay.
Second.
You were out of order.
Next. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to add a discussion of group tour trams.
Your second. No
Second.
Oh, second.
Second.
I'd like
You
to
better be quicker.
I'd like to add a discussion of the deer hunt.
Second.
That is all.
Anybody else? No more? Last chance.
There were two things mentioned earlier